She was born Araminta Ross around 1822, enslaved in Dorchester County, Maryland. From the moment she took her first breath, her life was not her own. She was property, a child born into a brutal system that sought to break her spirit before she could ever dream of freedom. But Harriet Tubman was no ordinary woman. She was destined to defy the chains of slavery and become a legend. As a young girl, Harriet was put to work tending to babies, setting animal traps, and hauling heavy loads. The beatings were frequent, the cruelty endless. But one event would change her life forever. One day, when she was around 12 years old, she was struck in the head by an iron weight, an injury meant for another enslaved person. The blow nearly killed her. She suffered lifelong seizures, headaches, and visions, but she believed these visions were messages from God, guiding her toward her true purpose.
By her early 20s, Harriet had had enough. The pain, the abuse, the separation of families. She could no longer endure it. In 1849, she made the boldest decision of her life. She would escape. With nothing but the North Star to guide her, she traveled nearly 100 miles to Pennsylvania, on foot, alone, and pursued by those who wanted to return her to slavery. It was a journey filled with danger, fear, and faith. But after days of walking, she crossed into a free state. Harriet Tubman was finally free. But freedom was not enough. She couldn't rest knowing that her family, her friends, and thousands of others were still in chains. She knew what she had to do. She had to go back.
Most people who escaped slavery never returned, but Harriet Tubman was different. Over the next 10 years, she made at least 13 daring trips back into the South, leading more than 70 enslaved people to freedom. With each journey, she risked capture, torture, and death. But she was fearless. She carried a revolver, not just for protection, but to ensure that no one turned back out of fear. She used the Underground Railroad, a secret network of safe houses, abolitionists, and allies who helped enslaved people escape to free states in Canada. Her knowledge of the land, her ability to move unnoticed, and her unshakable faith in God made her an unstoppable force. She became known as Moses, leading her people to freedom. Southern slave owners placed bounties as high as $40,000 on her head, but no one ever captured her. She later said, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger."
When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Harriet Tubman's fight for freedom entered a new phase. She joined the Union Army, first as a cook and nurse, but soon became a spy and scout for the Northern forces. She infiltrated Confederate territory, gathering intelligence, mapping enemy locations, and freeing enslaved people along the way. In 1863, she led the Combahee River Raid in South Carolina, an operation that freed more than 700 enslaved people, one of the largest emancipations of the war. She was the first woman to lead an armed military raid in U.S. history. But despite her service, she was never paid a proper soldier's salary and spent years fighting for compensation.
After the war, Harriet Tubman continued to fight, not with guns, but with her voice and her actions. She became a fierce advocate for women's rights, working alongside Susan B. Anthony in the fight for women's suffrage. She also established a home for elderly and formerly enslaved people, ensuring that those who had fought for freedom had a place to live in dignity. Harriet Tubman lived to see the end of slavery, but she never stopped fighting for justice. She died in 1913 at the age of 91, surrounded by family, friends, and those whose lives she had changed forever. Her final words, "I go to prepare a place for you."
Harriet Tubman was more than a freedom fighter. She was a warrior, a leader, and a symbol of courage, faith, and resilience. She defied the odds, outsmarted her enemies, and never let fear stop her from doing what was right. Today, her legacy lives on. Schools, statues, and even the future U.S. $20 bill will bear her image, ensuring that generations to come will know the story of the woman who led her people to freedom. She was born in chains but died a hero, and though she is gone, her legacy of bravery and justice will never be forgotten.
Harriet Tubman didn't just escape slavery, she dismantled it, one rescue at a time. She fought not just for herself, but for others. She risked everything so that others could have a chance at life, at freedom, at dignity. And because of her, America would never be the same. She was and always will be a legend.